Hello, everybody. There is non-stop action, tennis all over the world, particularly on the men's side in Europe right now. But of course, we've got the WTA finals on the horizon too in Guadalajara. We'll be covering that and so much more on the channel. But today, we're going to have a chat about a Grand Slam winner, a person that is quite capable of beating Novak Djokovic in a Grand Slam semi-final, as he did in Paris a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago now. He's certainly ruffled Nadal's feathers on a few occasions, none more so than in Australia. He's good on a hard court. He's good on clay. He's good indoors. He's good outdoors. But for a couple of years now, Jethro, this player, Dominic Thiem, has been, let's say, in the wilderness. We've had a few injuries, but form has been of a huge concern. But we do have some silver lining to this cloud. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. He's made amazing strides since July, really. If someone had told me in July that he'd have made 3 or 4 semi-finals on the main tour and challenger final and other quarterfinals, I'd been like, wow, I'll take that, because he could barely win a match coming back from that wrist injury, which was really, really quite significant. It could have ended his career last year. It was that bad, and then he re-injured it again when he was trying to get ready to defend his US Open title. And I mean, there was no way he was going to be fit enough for it, and re-injured it.
Let's wind the clock back 2 years, pretty much. He wins the US Open. He gets the monkey off his back. He'd been threatening to win a major before. He'd been in the Australian Open, and he came across Djokovic, and no shame in losing in 5 sets there. And in fact, I think he was unlucky to lose that day. I know he was 2-1 up, but he was having a great 12, 18, 24-month, whatever period you wanted. His trajectory was just constantly upward. He wins the US Open. He finally has that monkey off his back, having lost a few major finals. What happened next? Because I then remember seeing him about 6 weeks later losing to his good friend Diego Schwartzman at the French Open. Schwartzman was arguably in the best form of his life on clay. He'd just beaten Rafa in Rome. So what happened let's talk about that 6-week period, because I do remember, or maybe even less, it might have been 3 or 4 weeks. I do remember going into that French Open, and people were already getting a bit down on Dominic, and they were already suggesting that fatigue was setting in and that these 2 majors back-to-back was too much for many of these players. We know Novak had a unfortunate early disappearance from that US Open tournament, yes. a flying ball. We know that Rafa opted not to go. Rafa said it was the COVID situation, but we all know as well as anyone else, if both those 2 tournaments were on clay, I'm sure he would have been there in New York. But perhaps there was also some logic in that. What went on in those first few weeks, if you like, when the slide began?
I think it was really only 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks between.
It may have been, yeah.
The US Open and the French, maybe 3. It really wasn't long. Yeah, I remember it. I mean, I remember it was like the conditions were totally on French Open. It was, when Djokovic, Nadal obviously had that final, you had Patrick Mouratoglou chatting absolute crap as always, saying that Djokovic was the absolute favourite, and of course Nadal absolutely rolled him in 3. But it was very weird, really weird conditions. It was wintry, over in Paris, and so very heavy. And I mean, I didn't think Thiem looked particularly bad. I could tell he was tired. Had a decent match with Casper Ruud, and then faced Hugo Gaston, who is the drop shot gremlin of the ATP Tour. And that, I mean, he just dragged him to 5 sets, and that was just a painful watch, because he's just dropping it millimeters over the net every other point. It's just, it wasn't good for Thiem's body at all, and he hadn't really recovered properly yet. And then he plays Diego, who, as you said, was in the form of his life. Him and Diego have really, really fun matchups together. Diego can counterpunch, Thiem's power really well. He has a really good 2-hander, which they just complement each other really nicely. And yeah, I didn't think Thiem played particularly badly, and he still made the quarterfinal. Schwartzman deserved, I think, that semi-final. If Thiem was a bit more well-rested and a bit healthier, I'm sure he probably would have got over the line in 4 or 5. But Yeah, and then I wasn't too concerned, and then he got to the ATP finals
Yeah,
final,
yeah.
and
He beat
looks
Rafa
like
in straight sets in the group round robin stage. Unbelievable match. So maybe,
yeah,
but anyway, continue.
yeah, and there was that match, and then he beat Djokovic in 3 in another
Yeah,
amazing match, and I was like, yeah, he looks like the favorite again. He should have won 2019, and he got edged out by Tsitsipas.
yeah.
And then this exact same thing happened with Medvedev. He took the first set, looked like he was on his way, and just fell away a bit. And Medvedev and Tsitsipas are very good on these courts, and if you drop your level a bit, they're going to make you pay. And I think that was very tough for him as well. I think if he'd won that ATP finals, he wouldn't have had the slump that he went into a bit in the following year before he got his injury. But he did speak at length about how winning that Grand Slam kind of the pressure was off him to finally win one, and then it was kind of like, okay, where do I go from here? What's next? And I think that's kind of where his head was at for a while.
And then, of course, so yeah, perhaps I'm being a bit premature with my beginning of the decline by saying the French Open, but certainly come Australia. And by the way, with that US Open win, we remember the arguments with the shoes and the problems. And the reason I mention that is because in Australia, I think there was some foot or feet issues. Now, I don't know if they're down to the shoes that he was wearing, but I do remember him changing his shoes a few times. And in Australia in 2021, as this was, so almost 2 years ago, this was a shadow of the Dominic Thiem we'd seen a year before in Australia, and a shadow of the Dominic Thiem we'd seen at the US Open as well previously. In that, at the 2020 US Open, in the at that Australian Open, he struggled against Kyrgios, and Kyrgios is a better player now than he was then. You would have thought an on-form Dominic Thiem wins that match quite comfortably, but he struggles through. And then eventually he goes out. Was it to Karatsev he went out? Was it Khachanov?
Dimitrov, very comfortably as well.
Yes, straight sets.
Alarming. But it was like in the middle of the night, and I had uni at the time, so I didn't watch it. But I remember waking up and seeing stuff on social media, and apparently he looked exhausted. Like I think he lost the first set 6-love, and he literally just looked knackered. Yeah.
So something went on in this 4 or 5 month period, but particularly between the ATP Tour finals and Australia, because all was not well. At this point, though, you're just thinking, perhaps it's a lingering injury, perhaps it's the shoe thing, whatever. Perhaps it's even a confidence thing. But at this point, I don't think there were any long-term concerns. Even the greats can have an early exit, a major that can happen to anyone, particularly if you have got an injury issue. And I think he did take some time off, and we didn't see him again until the clay court season from memory. I certainly remember him playing Madrid. I think he got to the semi-finals where he either lost to Berrettini or Zverev, because that was the final. I think
it was Zverev. It was
Zverev, okay.
It was quite comfortable, I think. And
but I still think the alarm bells weren't quite ringing at this stage, because losing to Zverev in a Masters semi-final, even if it was comfortable, Zverev does tend to perform well in Madrid with the altitude there.
So I think there was a loss which concerned me a bit, and it was I think it was Dubai, and he lost to Lloyd Harris.
Okay.
And Lloyd Harris, it's a shame. He's actually gone and I think done something very similar to Thiem, and knackered his wrist for the whole year. But Lloyd Harris had a very good breakout season last year, especially on the hard courts. And he beat Thiem. And I was a bit worried at that point after his loss to Dimitrov. And then there was a really tight loss to Sonego in Rome. Again, I was a bit like, Sonego is playing well, but this is the match. This is the kind of match you should be winning.
Yeah.
And there was the Zverev loss. And then there was the French Open, which was probably the biggest concern, I would say.
Yeah. That was it a first round loss there?
Yes. Off the back of 2 straight finals, then a quarterfinal, and then first round. It was just, I think it was Andahar.
It was Pablo Andahar, yeah. And he won the first 2 sets, but went on to lose in 5.
Yeah, it was depressing.
I think but between, if we can pinpoint the drop between between ATP Tour finals and Australia, as in November 2020, December 2020, January 2021. We can pinpoint that as the beginning of the decline, if you like. I think many of us, and you and I included, probably didn't realize that there was a wider issue until that defeat to Andujar. In the first round of the French Open, that just should not be happening to somebody of Dominic Thiem's class and experience and pedigree. There has to be a wider issue, and it turned out there was, because what happened over the next what happened in the 12 months between that defeat to Andujar and July this year, which was also a line in the sand that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, well, I will say, I think I knew in the build-up of the French Open that he'd been having some mental struggles.
Okay.
Oh, yes, correct on the Lord Harris now. Nice. Yeah, and I knew he'd been having mental struggles, and there had been little niggling injuries, nothing like serious, but like, kind of irritating ones, which kind of got in the way. And then there was mental problems, and then he took a little break after the French Open, and then he played Mallorca on grass, and he's never done particularly well at Wimbledon, although he has beaten Federer and won a Stuttgart title in 2016. So he can obviously play on there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was up against Manarino first round, and it was a breakup. Was playing really, really well. Looked quite rejuvenated, and then went for a big forehand, and just his wrist just went, shattered it, and that was that really. And then like there was nothing he could do. He was wearing, had to wear a splint, and he was lucky to avoid surgery, but he did redo the injury again. So
okay.
Yeah, it was not good. And then he came back in, I want to say May at challenger level this year.
Yeah, because there'd been a run of losses, I think, in a row, hadn't there? I'm guessing that was pre-May and pre-challenger decision, or maybe that even overlapped. I don't know how many losses it was in a row he had, but it was multiple losses in a row, wasn't it?
Yeah, they carried over from last year and then carried into when he came back. And then, his first match was the Marbella Challenger, I think. And he lost to Pedro Cachin, who since then has actually had a bit of a breakout year. So good for him.
Sometimes you see that, don't you? You see a shock loss, or what you describe as a terrible loss for someone, but then years or even months later, you put it in perspective and go, actually, that loss can be explained because the other guy was actually a really good player.
Yeah, no, Cachin's very good on the clay, and it was Thiem's first match in almost a year. So,
but the run did continue a little bit. Was there another one or two losses on the Challenger Tour? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he went back to the Challenger Tour until post French Open. But every main draw loss. So every main draw he entered, he lost.
Yeah, first
round, exactly. And was barely getting sets. Got a set off Millman, and he lost straight sets to Murray, which isn't embarrassing, obviously. But on clay, that's the team that's the match that the team should be winning. There was Cecchinato, who was in awful form. That was probably the most concerning. Was when he lost to Cecchinato. The forehand was just all over the place, really.
Where was that?
Oh, I can't remember, actually. It was one of the clay court tournaments.
Okay, one of the clay court tournaments. Yeah. I also saw him in action this summer. I think it may even have been that match. I just can't remember which one it was. There was a match I'm pretty sure it would have been Kitzbühel, I would say. If not, it was in the Alps, either Austria or Switzerland, because I can remember the scenery. It was a nice sunny afternoon, which would also suggest it was sometime this summer, sometime post Wimbledon, I think, in that clay court swing, mini clay court swing that we have post Wimbledon. And I saw him, and it was better than he lost the match. But it was better than we had seen probably for about 12 or 18 months, but there wasn't a lot of competition for that prize, if you like. But it was it still left me worried about the rest of his career, to be honest, in terms of whether we would ever get to see him at the top level of tennis again. And when I say top level, I don't necessarily mean winning a major, but I even just mean winning, competing for masters or competing for majors themselves by going deep. He's currently ranked 113, by the way, but it has been much lower than that. And the reason for that is there has been an upturn in form. And for me, Jethro, the biggest positive turning point or line in the sand, I'm going to use that expression again, for me came in New York. I watched the match against Pablo Carreño Busta, and this is a guy, Carreño Busta, who just won the Masters in Canada, Montreal, by beating Hubert Hurkacz in the final there. And going into, this is also Pablo Carreño Busta at his best slam, arguably. It's where he'd obviously got the semi-finals in 2020, the year that team had won it. And I'm telling you now, that match was nip and tuck. I know it was only 4 sets and not 5, but team was 2 sets to love down, gets it back to 2 sets to 1. I'm pretty sure in at least one of the 3 sets that team lost, he broke serve and may even have been a break-up. I just remember just thinking this could go either way. Was it the first set? Did he go a break-up?
First set, he did, and I foolishly got my hopes up.
Tell us about what your thoughts are on this match.
Yeah, I mean, it was first day of the US Open, so and I was already a bit gutted that he'd been given this awful draw with Carreño Busta first round. And Carreño Busta's a 2-time semi-finalist in New York and should have beaten Zverev. If Carreño Busta's mental game was better, he'd be a US Open finalist in 2020. And so I was already a bit concerned, and then team went an early break up, and he was playing really, really nicely, and got very excited. And then, Carreño Busta, credit to him, he played amazingly, and team's forehand fell apart in the second set, really. But he had
2 sets to 1. That was also positive for me. The mental toughness needed. I know he doesn't win the match, but this is a much better Dominic Thiem than we'd seen for the previous 18 months. He's 2 sets to love down. He gets it back to 2 sets to 1. He could have won that 4th set that he ended up losing. I just left that going. We're going to talk about his recent performances even more recently, which obviously give us even more hope. But this is him going toe to toe with probably at that point the 5th or 6th favorite for the title. A lot of people had Carreño Busta as their dark horse. I know he didn't make it to the semis in the end or anything like that. I think he went out either in the 4th round or the quarterfinals. I can't remember now. But 4th round, yeah. So, but that was a surprise that he probably didn't get to the quarters and etc. So some people even had him winning the tournament. So this is now Dominic Thiem going toe to toe in the first round in New York with a player that he wouldn't have dreamt of going toe to toe with in the previous 6, 12 or 18 months.
Absolutely. It was really encouraging. It was still gutting because I think Thiem's got he had an insanely good head-to-head against Carreño Busta. And he's kind of got that with a lot of players. And then
have a quick look at this from Ghost.
Thiem was pretty good. He does, yeah. I would say the only times I've really thought his mental strength wasn't great is when he's been in a position to win, like the ATP Finals 2019 and 2020. But a lot of the time he's got such a good never say die attitude, which we saw last week. Obviously, we'll come on to more.
We're getting close to the present. You can tell. Yeah. So we had that result against Carreño Busta. Of course, it's disappointing. You never want to go out in the first round, but I left that as a neutral observer, but someone who wants to see talent fulfill itself as well. So therefore, I am a fan of Thiem in that respect, of course. And so I left it feeling quite happy about perhaps he was going to have a decent autumn. I would say he's even exceeded that. He's not won a tournament yet. We're not talking about the next world number 1 or anything quite like that, or he's going to win the Grand Slam next year. But we've seen more and more positivity in the last few weeks, right?
Yes. Back-to-back semi-finals.
Right.
Lost to Rublev in 2 pretty competitive sets.
He's competing again. He's
really competing with the big dogs. And we're talking about last week, which was amazing. Where he beat Hurkacz, a guy who he lost to twice. This is back in 2019, 2020. This is when Thiem's in his prime. And Hurkacz presents a real matchup issue for him. And Thiem
Let's talk about that Hurkacz match. Tell us, just can you see this on your screen right now? Just watch this. If you can see it, see the backhand. We're about to watch. We're only going to watch 1 point, but it's enough. Look at this backhand return.
Does not get old, that. Oh my God.
So, and he did a few of those. There were some excellent backhands. He won it with a forehand winner as well, which is also a good sign for him. He faced 3 match points. What are your feelings about this match? Hubert Hurkacz, a Masters 1000 winner, top 20 player comfortably. You know, again, he's not just competing now; he's actually beating these players.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the best like team wins to experience as like a fan of his over the last few years, because even if he was at his best, you'd still look at a match with Hurkacz and be like, oh god, well, he's never beaten him before. This is going to be tricky. So when he's still on this comeback trail,
yeah,
and Hurkacz beat him in Marseille a few weeks ago in straight sets as well. So that wasn't one to look forward to. And when he went 2 match points down in that second set tiebreak, I was like, and Hurkacz had a serve on it. I was like, oh, here we go. This is going to be another straight sets loss. And then Hurkacz bangs the first serve down the middle, and Thiem just finds an insane backhand return, and Hurkacz pushes his forehand long. And I was like, that really just right there is why he's a champion, why he's one of the best players that we've had in the last sort of 5 years, because even it all seems lost there, and he just like finds that star power inside of him, even if things haven't been going his way, just to make something happen. And then and then just played an amazing tiebreak in the third set. And
it's a pity he never got to world number one during that 2019 to 2021 period, if you like, or beginning of 2021. His absolute purple patch. If he'd have perhaps won that Australian Open in 2020, when he certainly had chances to do so, or perhaps managed to do even better than he did on the clay courts, perhaps he would have got to world number one, because I do think that might be a step too far for him now. He's reached number 3 in the past, but his comments after the match as well against Hurkacz, he said, this is a victory. This victory is especially unbelievable because it's my first victory over an almost top 10 guy. I like that, because I was just trying to do the mental arithmetic where Hurkacz is, and he always feels as though he's around about 10 or 15 in the world. So I guess he remains there. So this is my first victory over an almost top 10 guy in my comeback process. We all know what that means. Who returned to the tour in March after missing 9 months due to the wrist injury. He said it was unbelievable to play, a great atmosphere and a great match. And it really, really was. 3-6, 7-6, 7-6, which only barely tells the story. There were some great rallies involved, and I certainly urge our audience to check that out.
Absolutely. It was a nail biter for sure. I didn't actually catch the match with Korda, sadly, but that was a tough loss to take.
It's a tough loss, Jethro, and maybe you've got a different perspective on this as a fan who still wants him to win every match he plays. As a neutralish observer, if you like, I still take positives from that. If he's you don't want that to continue. You don't want to have, in a year from now, we don't want to be doing a pod saying he's competing but he's losing all the time. If we're at the stage in the process where when he was playing Carreño Busta in September in New York, he's competing against one of the best guys in the world at the time on that surface in that moment, and he's competing. He's now competing and beating from time to time. I think Sebi Korda is in, I don't know about the best form of his life, but he's in a very good period at the moment. And I think Sebi Korda's trajectory is like this. I can see him winning tournaments next year in a bigger way. So I think this is good. Whether he wins or loses is not important. Of course, it is important, and he wants to get that first title. But listen, that title is coming for sure.
Yeah,
I think so, too. Nice comment here from Archit. He's thinking that indoor hard courts have been good for him. The ball bounces less than on clay, so he's not overthinking as much. He's also consistently healthy now, not holding back on the forehand. Yeah, I think the health issue in particular is very important. The confidence is certainly coming back. He certainly had time to think about that backhand that we just showed, and he didn't show any signs of a lack of confidence there, as that was pinpointed, arrowed past Hurkacz. But he goes out to Korda. Did you watch the Korda match?
No, I actually missed it, sadly. So I couldn't really give too much. I know it was a very competitive match. And
lost in a third set tiebreak. Am I right in thinking that?
Surprised me, because Thiem's so good in tiebreaks. Is scary good.
He's scarily good. I think he won, I don't know, it was like 10 out of 11 at one point back in his purple period. So, Jethro, let's bring us now to the present. He's just made 2 semi-finals of 2 ATP tournaments in a row indoors. What can we expect from him? He's in action, I think, today, is it?
I think he's probably starting quite soon, actually.
Okay, yeah, he is. He's playing Tommy Paul. That's a really tough first round match
Yeah.
to have.
He's also got Medvedev round 2 if he wins that. So
yeah, that's right. I remember that being the issue. That's in Vienna, of course. So he's got Tommy Paul today. Listen, he could go out today. And my point is this. That doesn't mean that the story, because again, Tommy Paul is there or thereabouts. He's not far behind players like Hubert Hurkacz and Sebi Korda, in my opinion. That, in other words, he's a player that anyone in the world can lose to on any given day. That doesn't mean I'm thinking he will win. I'm thinking it's at least 50-50, whereas I would never have thought that even as little as 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Then, of course, Medvedev. Listen, who knows? I mean, listen, again, he doesn't have to win this tournament. I mean, obviously, it's in his home country, but he doesn't have to win. You know, if he just won those 2 matches, that would be an insane level of progress shown. And even if he just beats Tommy Paul and goes out to Daniel Medvedev, no shame in that. Full steam ahead for 2023. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I win against Paul, lose against Medvedev, and put up a good fight. I'd say that's, we're still, you just got to keep expectations, I think, realistic. I think I was a bit naive when he came back, and I thought he was going to win the first tournament he played, and I didn't expect it to be quite as arduous as it was, but you kind of get to a point where you set kind of like more realistic expectations, and he's still only 29. Things are looking so positive for 2023. I wouldn't he's going to be back in the top 100 pretty soon. If not by the end of the year, quite quickly into the start of next year. I think
top 100 it's a matter of weeks away, as you say, either this year or the beginning of next. And listen, I mean, maybe he might even overachieve in this respect. And I think he has in the last 6 to 8 weeks gone even faster on his comeback than I expected. I think the next thing is to win a title. Doesn't matter if it's 250, 500, whatever. Win a title. That would just be unbelievable. That would be great for him. It would be great for tennis. I know you, Jethro, in particular, would love to see a team coming back in that respect.
I would. Or just compete at Grand Slams as well, because that's where it's really at, isn't it?
Of course, if he could have a run in Australia and in particular in Paris, Archie is really getting excited for 2023. Of course, that is also far enough away to really be optimistic about. Maybe Australia might just still come a bit too soon for him. And I know that many people see Thiem as a clay court perhaps player more than a hard court, but don't forget it's the hard court slams where arguably he's done even better. I mean, I know he's lost 2 French Open finals to Rafa, but he obviously was in the final in Australia and obviously won New York. So
he also has one Masters 1000. That was Indian Wells, which is also a hard court. So I really don't see the difference between him on a clay or hard court anymore. And as Archie mentioned earlier, like his indoor hard court level is actually just really, really, really good. And I don't think I'd prefer him on any surface apart from. I would like to see him bring this level to grass, because I think he's definitely got the potential to do that. But not much of a difference between clay and hard at all.
Ghost is really going for it. He thinks that he could be top 10 by this time next year.
Yes, let's do it. I'm here for that.
I mean,
I'm going to start tweeting that now.
The progress from now would be a title of a decent level of progress would be a title of some sort in the next 6 months, and good runs in Melbourne and maybe in Paris too. I don't want to say maybe in Paris. If he's having a good run in Melbourne and he's already won a title before of some sort, especially if it's on clay, then there's no reason why he can't have a very good run in Paris. And that would be the trajectory, if you like. Certainly, if he's going to be getting top 10 next year, as Ghost suggests, that trajectory is going to have to be like this, which is achievable. His talent is still there.
Of course. And he's also going to have to contend with the fact that, Alcaraz is top dog right now. Sinner has improved a lot. Rublev, Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Zverev, obviously Zverev, if he's fit. All these guys have arguably got better. I know Medvedev's having a bit of a dip, but if his level against Djokovic in those first few sets and Astana is anything to go by, it's going to be a tough match for him this week if they play. But Yeah, like the competitions has raised in the top 10 since he's gone, so he's going to have to deal with that. But there's not. I don't really think there's anyone who can hit with the same power, spin, and consistency as him. I don't think there's anyone on the circuit who can do that. So he'll still have that going for him if he keeps this trajectory going.
Something Tony Nadal said about Dominic Thiem about 2 years ago, I would say. So it's before a lot of these travails came along. And I'm not saying that Tony Nadal, everything he says is right, etc., etc., etc. But this was just an interesting comment. He said he just felt that for Thiem to be a multiple slam winner, and it may well have been, he said this before the US Open win, he felt that he would need more variety in his play. And what I think he means by this, I think he means, certain volley, drop shot ability, maybe a.
Do you know when he said that?
I would guess about 2 years ago, because it was still when Thiem was a consideration that you would, it wouldn't have been a year ago because Tony, no one would. He was injured, and no one. The most concern about him then was just getting back on the tour, if you like.
I find that interesting if it was after their Barcelona meeting in 2019, because Thiem.
Oh, it would have been definitely after that. It was definitely
because Thiem played an absolute masterclass against Nadal that day. Like drop shot, slices, power, everything. Okay. I've never seen.
Perhaps
probably one of the best.
Surfaces, by the way, maybe he means across all surfaces as well.
Possibly, yeah. Because that performance was one of the best clay court performances and the best Thiem match I think I've ever seen. Nadal did nothing wrong. So yeah. But no, I'm sure. And Tony Nadal, he's done very, very well with Rafa. So I'm sure he knows what he's on about. But yeah, we'll see. I think Thiem's got the variety though these days. To be honest, he's got a lot to his game. He's not just power.
Let's bring a bit of romance before we conclude this, Jethro, because we love a bit of romance on Talking Tennis. First of all, what is it that drew you to Dominic Thiem as a player? What is it you like about him as a player?
It was 2016 when I first saw him, and he was playing in some clay during the Golden Swing, so early year clay tournament, and he was playing against Rafa. And I was just like a diehard Rafa fan at the time, and I liked other players as well, but Nadal was like my number one. And I tuned into this match and just saw this Austrian kid with his Babolat pure strike just absolutely destroying the ball against Rafa, and I was like, this guy's amazing. I'm like, this guy is just so cool. So and he won that match. And then I kept my eye on him during Indian Wells. I think this is pre-Indian Wells, so Acapulco and all of this stuff. And he beat Dimitrov, Tomic, all these players. And I was like, God, I was just instantly a fan. It was the one-handed backhand. And I don't necessarily just like players with one-handed backhands. It has to have something attached to it. Yes, correct, he does. And yeah, just the way he could just unleash on it, really only kind of rivaled maybe Stan, really, that level of power. Mm-hmm. And the forehand was amazing. Just everything his game was just so, so cool. And come, the French Open that year, I was just like, I'm rooting for this guy as much as I'm rooting for Nadal, which had never happened before. And yeah, just the way he carries himself, I think he's a really good person. Seems to get along really well with everybody. The way his game matches up with certain players as well is really the way him and Djokovic match up is just awesome. I could watch their matches for hours. And then I became a big fan of Diego Schwartzman around the time as well, and I love the way they match up as well. He's so exciting to watch, and I feel like certain players who've been in the top 5, top 10, obviously, exciting to watch is very subjective, isn't it? Because there's people who'd be like, "Oh, Nick Kyrgios is so exciting." I'm like, I actually think he's just boring now. The antics, don't care anymore. Mm-hmm. And then there's people who say that Cam Norrie's exciting, because they like his style, and you've got to.
Even Daniel Medvedev, people can find him exciting because he's unorthodox. And
Medvedev, people love his game, and it's fascinating. I find it fascinating, Medvedev's game. Yeah. Really, really cool. So, but yeah, just the explosiveness. I guess lots of new fans to tennis, in the last year with Alcaraz, bringing in this new generation and that explosiveness, kind of remembering Thiem's ground strokes, I guess, when I first started watching him. And yeah, It's just been the same ever since.
and very few people can rock a turtleneck like Dominic Thiem. That image I used for the thumbnail, by the way, I wanted to use it because I remember him wearing that outfit for the US Open final of 2021. So it was a year after he won the tournament as he was recovering from an injury. One other thing before I let you go, Jethro, is I remember having a chat. I think it was pretty short with Owen from Popcorn Tennis earlier this year.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, we all know that guy. It was about peak Medvedev, and I think it was even more specific. It was peak Medvedev on a hard court and peak Thiem on a hard court. Pretty sure. So what I mean by those expressions, I mean probably 2019 US North American swing, Daniel Medvedev, 2021 hard court, Daniel Medvedev, through to probably the Australian Open final midway through the third set this year, if you like. Those two windows, that sort of September to January of the end of last year and this year. We all know what peak Medvedev is anyway. You know what I mean? And peak Thiem, we already mentioned it at various points in 2020 in particular, I would say, on the hard courts. Owen and I were both in agreement, and I'm pretty sure you will be too, although you might be different. Peak Thiem beats peak Daniel Medvedev.
Ooh.
That was our impossible to answer question that we answered, albeit not categorically.
It's a very interesting debate. You know, we saw the way Thiem just dismantled Medvedev in that 2020 semi-final, US Open.
Not peak Medvedev as what,
but it wasn't
Medvedev
exactly.
Now.
In 2020, he was good, but it wasn't 2019 or 2020 or 21 Medvedev. So yeah, and Thiem can really mess with him with his kick serve, and then he can mix up the slice. He's got a lot of power, which Medvedev doesn't mind as much, but I think the mixture of power and spin and then the slice as well, I think is what gets to Medvedev. But Medvedev can also really frustrate Thiem and get a lot of balls back and just not give him an inch on the baseline. I would just love to watch them in the absolute peak modes go at it at the Australian Open or US Open. That would be amazing.
But they have a head-to-head. They have a head-to-head of 3-2 in Thiem's favor. But that one difference, if you like, is because they did play once on clay in Barcelona, and Thiem won that comfortably. So let's say outside of clay on the hard courts, either indoors or outdoors, they are even Steven at 2-all. But yeah, I just think that I don't know, the absolute highest level of Thiem. Also because of the nature of the way he plays, which is a bit higher risk than other players, and perhaps Daniel Medvedev included, just I think made us both come to that conclusion. And seeing our eyes as well, just seeing what we saw with our eyes with and that's the thing, when you mentioned earlier about these other players on the tour, I do think top Thiem, if he was to get back to that level of 2020, 2019, I do think that level is good enough to get him back in the top 5 in the world. That level is.
I agree.
That level is good enough to get into Grand Slam finals again. That level. So as good as Alcaraz is, I'm not saying that Alcaraz will win less majors or Thiem or anything like that, or if they were to meet each other 10 times, he would have been much. But that level is good enough to win big tournaments, to reach top 5 in the world, and maybe even another slam.
Definitely. I think peak Thiem still beats Alcaraz like right now.
Peak Thiem is definitely better than peak Zverev and peak on all surfaces, pretty much with the exception of grass. Peak Zverev and peak Tsitsipas as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neither of those two have reached that level. I'm not saying they won't, but they haven't.
Yeah, I feel like Tsitsipas should be reaching that level. It's kind of different with Zverev because
different
he plays,
type of player and
plays completely differently. Whereas Tsitsipas, although he plays with a lot less spin, they're both very aggressive. They like to move you around a lot, and they like to dominate from the baseline. So yeah, I don't really know what peak Zverev looks like because he was really, really hyped up as an 18-year-old, and I never really got the hype personally. I didn't think he was what he was cracked up to be, and some would say he hasn't achieved as much as he should have done with the potential, but I'm actually kind of surprised he's won the amount of Masters that he has with his game, because someone of that height, obviously he sorted the serve out before he got injured and he was serving really well. but he's still. I won't use the term pusher because I feel like that does a disservice to professional tennis players in the day. But he's not particularly aggressive, and it kind of relies on his his long levers, to get him to every ball and kind of put balls in awkward positions. And if he had kind of like Rublev's mindset of attack, like God, that would be quite a terrifying player. Whereas Tsitsipas is a lot more aggressive and attack minded. So, but like Thiem can do everything that they can do, but also he's got the other layers as well. So yeah, I would put Thiem way above them at peak. But yeah, Medvedev above Zverev and Medvedev. Sorry,
but I think Tsitsipas is also someone that still may yet come good, etc. And obviously Zverev is injured right now, but
he needs to get rid of his dad, Tsitsipas. That's my opinion. But
we have spoken about that on many occasions. Listen, Jethro, any concluding thoughts on the near and distant future of Dominic Thiem's career?
I will say that he will be competing for slams again. Maybe not in Australia, but I would say midway from next year onwards. I reckon we'll see him in at least a quarterfinal, hopefully onwards.
On that optimistic and positive and a bright note, Jethro, we will be bringing this to a close. Thank you very much for coming on board today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. Thanks, Jethro, and we'll be speaking to you again very soon.
Bye-bye.